Good evening, Venerable Sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, I should put my headphones on. Excuse me 1 second. I should have done that. Okay, so you can hear me okay?
Yes, I do hear.
Yes. And I can hear you also. So Venerable Kondanna, I can see you on the screen. Venerable Sutadhara, I can't see you, but I presumably that you are there somewhere. So wonderful to see you and to listen to your Dhamma and to have the opportunity to meet you and to have a discussion.
Really, yeah, same. We feel
Sadhu. And of course, this is one of the sort of unexpected side effects of the pandemic, is that somehow we find ourselves reaching out to people in new kinds of ways and making connections that we didn't have before. So that's really lovely. Just to begin this session, may I just say once more an expression of appreciation to Deepika, who started this project, to Radha, who's been her support all the time, to Dhammanet, who has handled the technical side of things so well. And as one of my major jobs is working with Sutta Central, and so I work with programmers and technology, and I am constantly amazed that anything works ever. Because there are so many things that can go wrong. But here we are. Now, if you can just allow me very briefly to read a brief bio from each of the Venerables who is with us today from the website. So Venerable Kondanna received novice ordination in 1968, monastic training in Colombo, and then a BA in Buddhist University in Kalania. Is that correct?
Yeah, right.
Very good. Can I ask who was your teacher there at Kalania when you did your BA?
Professor Karnaratna was there, and Dr. Oliver, and Dr. Jayasurya.
Okay, yeah.
And Jayasurya.
Okay, yeah.
Venerable Dr. Bhupali.
Okay.
Yes.
That was a great generation for Buddhist scholarship in Sri Lanka, wasn't it?
Right, yes.
At the time, yeah. And since then you've come and you're now in New York, is that correct?
Yes.
Staten Island. Staten Island. I was in New York recently. I should have come to visit you. I must make sure to come and visit you.
Next time, please.
Next time, yeah. I was with our friends at the Buddhist Insights, and so you're working and teaching and supporting the community in New York currently.
Right. Yes.
Excellent. Well, so wonderful to meet you and to have you with us. Yes, and just a few words from Venerable Tapovane Sutadhara. So Venerable, a Bachelor of Buddhist Textual Studies, BA and MA from Hawaii, and the Director of Ventura Buddhist Studies Center. So Venerable, are you in Ventura at the moment?
Yes, I'm in Ventura. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Yeah. I also was in Ventura recently and gave a talk. So next time I'm there, I should.
Please.
Now, and say hello to the Buddhist community in Ventura if anybody there is watching. Okay, so so you were a senior lecturer at the Department of Linguistics in the University of Kalania.
Yes.
Okay. And can I just ask, you got your MA, I'm seeing at the in Hawaii. Was that with Kalapahana as the teacher?
And during that time, Professor Kalapahana was there. Actually, it's at Department of Linguistics. Professor Kalapahana of philosophy.
Of course, yeah.
I knew him.
Okay, yeah. He's been very influential to me. I've some of his books have really shaped the way that I've seen Dhamma a lot. Yeah, he's a very amazing philosopher. Okay, so thank you so much to both of you for your talks. Now we're going to go to some questions from the live audience, and while we're waiting for the questions to come in, I had a couple of questions that I noted down, which I might give to the Venerables as we go, just from your talks, if that's okay.
Yes.
And I'll start with Venerable Kondanna because your talk was first. And Venerable, you brought up the topic of that many of us who think of ourselves as Buddhists, but we don't necessarily kind of live in that way and practice as Buddhists. And I know that this is a kind of a perennial problem. It's the same for every religion or every spiritual path. I know when I was a teenager, I read the books of Friedrich Nietzsche, and he said that, he famously said, the last Christian died on the cross. And so it's not just in Buddhism where people fail to live up to the values of their founders. And of course, it's not just other people who are like that, it's also us as well, because there are a few of us who can say that we've fully lived up to the very high standards that the Buddha set. Can I ask you, Venerable, how do we encourage people to do better? How do we lift people up and get them to aspire to practice the Dhamma in a way that's going to be the highest and the best that they can?
You know, Venerable, this is the time for us to, encourage them. They can really, that's the reason why that I brought up that topic, because even nowadays that they are having good time. So, their time at home, they are very much nothing to do else, like they complain about boredom.
Right.
I believe they should be thinking why it is happening now. So it should be shocking for them, a great shock, because they are now imprisoned in their own homes.
Right.
So they definitely should be able to see this. Looking around and wow, these things have happened Buddha's time, even today. Buddha's time it happened in Vaishali, but today it's happening all throughout the world. Throughout the world. So what is it teaching us? It's really giving us opportunity to reflect back. Are we doing right? Don't we think that we are Mother Nature's teaching us something?
Right.
We are going too far, too rushed, and really you are not taking care of yourself spiritually, but instead you are really running, but nothing you can achieve. So even universe cannot breathe in life, we are polluting whole environment. And therefore I believe these are the things that we should, stop them and think about it. Just get them to think. I believe humanity was like this all throughout the time. But if we get this something in their mind, if we can start thinking about, I believe they can do better and reflect on, get back to spirituality, balance their lives in a spiritual qualities in their life. Even though they are good people, all these people are very kind and compassionate people. Many of them, they try to take care of each other. They try to take care of the monks, but the others, they have to take care of themselves too. So I think this is the time for us to give them that, encouragement, provide that, we ourselves do that too, but definitely, but it's not really, we see that they hear it, they will ignore it, they forget it, hear it and forget it. And that's how it goes. So therefore we have to reminding, every day we have to remind.
Yeah. You in your talk you referred back to the story of the Bodhisattva and going out of the house and seeing those signs of the old man, the sick man, the dead man, and the Devadutas. And I mean, there's the version of that story which is told in the Anguttara Nikaya, I think in the Anguttara Threes, where Yama is interrogating a man and saying, did you see the messengers that I sent you? And he's saying, what messengers? Because this is not just something that happened to the Bodhisattva. It's not just something that happened to Siddhartha. It's something that happens to all of us. We see these messengers. And I mean, we're seeing that in a shocking way at the moment in New York, the mass graves being dug in New York, something that we didn't imagine that we would see in our lifetime.
Very true. Yes, that really, once people have a shock, Prince Siddhartha having those experiences, that was a shock. He never had them before, no experience, but having that experience, he started thinking. He was so depressed. And that's how he was thinking, if it is happening to me and to all, what is the point of this life? So that's how he started thinking about it. I believe very same thing we can get, same way. This is a really shocking situation, so people can start thinking, that would encourage them to be spiritual, go into the spiritual direction.
Yeah, definitely. Sangwega, right?
Yes.
Maha Sangwega. Sabbaloka Maha Sangwega is what we should be looking at. Yeah.
Yes.
Also, an interesting point that you just mentioned there. When Siddhartha first encountered these signs, he was depressed, right? He was confused. He didn't know how to cope with it or deal with it. And I think this is something that I feel that too often in Buddhism, and from a Buddhist and a psychological point of view, we try to give people coping strategies so that they don't feel those painful feelings. But which of course is fair enough, right? People have to cope and have to get by. At the same time, though, it's also natural if you're in a situation like this to feel anxiety, to feel stress, to feel depression, to not know what to do. These are natural feelings as well.
True. But having had that experience, that they would be seeking the help, guidance. So that's what mostly people do. Of course, that's what we are doing these days. As we are here, they are throughout the day. Even though it's nobody's out, nobody's at work, yet we are busy listening to people, their experiences, what is happening at home, and how the children are behaving. All these things we have to listen and guide them, and encourage them to let's practice. Let's come together in the evenings. So through using these new technologies, still, even though we are living far away, is to provide community to get together and do things individually at homes, and as a community we are together by connected with the logical facilities.
And we have the extra dukkha of the technology as well, which is also a reminder of
True.
in a way it reminds us how valuable it is to see people in person, and the fact that we can connect obviously with yourselves in the States is fantastic. At the same time, it's much better to be in a room with someone.
True. True.
Venerable Sutadhara, could I ask you just a couple of questions from relating to your talk?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So Venerable, first of all, may I just thank you for acknowledging the Lokanta Vihara and the monastery at the end of the world. This was made for it's made for circumstances like this. And in your talk, you talked a lot about how nature is changing, and how this pandemic relates to climate change, and it relates to the pollution crisis, collapse of species, all of these things, which is a consequence of our actions.
Yes.
And as a Buddhist renunciate, you're living in California, in the cradle of hedonism and prosperity. So how do you, when you try to teach people about having less and being more content, how does that come across? How do you manage to do that?
Well, actually, in any situation, whether it is like materially that you are well off, or materially not well off, but the people are suffering with so many things. Like even we call rich people and those who are having everything, they think they are having all the sufferings. So that they come with a lot of other other problems, their own problems. I really like, in a way, that I'm referring to the other question that you asked about the practice of our traditional Buddhist.
Right.
But actually, the traditional Buddhist can take more from the people who are not traditionally Buddhist. And they are looking at the Dhamma from the viewpoint of the utility. Then how valuable, how useful this Dhamma to solve my problem. I think that approach is I see here more. And well, it's like individually I talk to people, and also in groups. I see all these actions, and at the same time that even though we say it is it is a very rich country, but even in this little town, when we go to give the breakfast for homeless once a month, we have over 200 people to feed.
Right.
So that is this is the kind of these extremes that you can see in any situation. So I think it's very valuable that all these actually the culturally Buddhist practices have been hit in our lives because of that certain historical factors that each time of in a certain given time of the history, the people encountered different difficulties and they found some solutions for those. But only I think the negativity is that we are continuing with the same practices without paying more attention to the other. That means that when we have a list of all these things that we do, and be satisfied that, okay, I practice the teachings of the Buddha. It's very important to take care of young people, and also take care of all the clergy and building temples. It's very important. Yes. Then but at the same time that we have to see that okay, what is going on in our life, and how can we find some form of solution by practicing Buddhism. What is the real practice of Buddhism means? How to be a better father, better mother, better child, better relative, better neighbor, or all those things. We can ask that question. So that is how I look at it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. One thing which struck me in your talk is that you spoke of community property and of the fact that this earth, everything, the air and the land and everything is just here. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to everyone. And of course, this is very much against the ethos of sort of modern economies, and particularly the United States, which has probably gone further than anywhere in privatizing public space and removing public space from the people. And I think this is something which is like a really important principle for us to bear in mind. In Buddhism and in the Sangha, like we share everything, and we have a few personal possessions like our robes and so on, but basically everything in the Sangha is shared, and not just with the Sangha, but also the community. And I think that ethos of having everything which is shared and community property is something that we've really lost sight of.
Yes, I think that actually when we look at the Pali version of the second precept of 5 precepts, we call it adatta adana, taking what is not given, right?
Yeah.
So when we take what is not given, if what is not given means what is not needed for me, right? So I think that as a world community, all have to cultivate that approach, that I take what is needed only. So that is how I think that we should interpret in this age,
Yeah.
how we take things for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and how much we need is we think we need a lot, but actually the things that we really need is quite small and quite easy to satisfy.
Yes, and also this this situation actually showed us that okay,
right.
even though I how much I collected and I kept, okay, maybe for few months to live, and I am stored everything for my family, and then if all of us get this virus, and how much can we use this, right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And the other point which you made, which I thought also was very very important one, was that the global nature of this issue. And it always strikes me that, like with so many of the important issues for our time, that they are very much global in nature, climate change being another example. And they require a global response. Now, in this case, obviously conditions are different in different countries, so the national governments respond in their own way, and that's fair enough. But at the same time, to coordinate a global response is so important, and it reminds us that we can't isolate ourselves. And even just in the news yesterday, I saw that I think there's now been a case of an indigenous person in an isolated tribe in South America who's fallen ill or perhaps died with coronavirus. I can't recall the details, but even in such an isolated place, that they're still vulnerable to it. So that idea that the Buddha was always about sabbe sata, yeah, and all about the sabalokasming, yeah, for the whole world. So this is that ethic that we really need to make foremost.
Yeah, in that that Brazilian the Amazon forest,
right.
that the situation is true, and
right.
also that actually when someone else is in suffering, that if we don't take it as our own suffering, part of our own suffering, then we are not interrelated. That we are not interrelated in that way, right? If we don't take care of the other, then when it comes to me, nobody is there to take care of me either, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much for the chance to ask a few questions there, but I won't do too much because this is supposed to be questions from the audience as well. So let me just have a look at a couple of the questions from the audience. Okay, so first one from Jenny Shen, and hi Jenny, if you're still out there. So Jenny asks, addressed to me, about the perspective on vulnerable women and children and those who are in the home and other vulnerable groups such as elders and the poor. And of course, there's so many vulnerable groups. And if we go around the world, you know, the homeless was already mentioned, the refugees and asylum seekers, obviously like in a country like, say, India, then the poor or the outcasts, in the United States, prison population, on and on it goes. And also the African American population in the States has proven to be highly vulnerable. And one of the things that this shows is that even though the virus itself does not discriminate, it affects all people. Well, maybe it discriminates on the basis of age, but certainly not on the basis of race or anything like that. But the conditions that a person is in will make a great impact. If a person has access to good health care, if they have good community support, if they're living in an environment that is healthy and not toxic and polluted, and all of these are factors. So when those things are degraded already, then the impact of the coronavirus will be much more so for those vulnerable people. And so this is something that this is why we need strong institutions and strong frameworks that are going to balance that and to ensure that the weak and the vulnerable are always being looked after. How do we help in this time? I think everybody can help, and look around you in your local area and just see what you can do. If it's your neighbours who need help, look if there are local women's shelters, refuges, community centres. They need food. Here in Australia, when the Sangha has too much food offerings, so we can't eat them all, then we give our extra food to local community centres and neighbourhood centres. And here in Sydney, I mean, quite literally, we can walk to 3 or 4 different centres that are in need of food for the community. That's how common this situation is. We just walk 3 or 4 blocks and we can find a women's refuge, a community centre, and so on. So find someone in the local area or reach out. There are services that you can call. Look out for people in your community, in your family. Don't imagine that it can't happen in your Dhamma community. It can and it does. I always remember a story that was told a number of years ago by a lady called Oyupon, who is a Thai Buddhist reformer. And she said that when she was growing up, her father used to go to the temple every week on the Poya day, on the Uposatha day, and used to go and offer dana, and he was friends with the monks there and would engage in discussions and talk for hours about Dhamma with the monks in the temple. And when he would come back home, he would beat his wife and he would molest his children. So don't imagine that the people who are coming to your temple, everyone's nice when they come to the temple. But the reality of what's happening in the community is not always the same as that. So we have to be alive to these facts and aware of them. Look out for people, give them help, give them support, and don't just ignore warning signs or dismiss them. A huge part of this is simply not believing the women or the children or the victims of abuse. If somebody talks about abuse or shows sign of it, believe them, look after them, and take care of them. Another, Nilushi, hi Nilushi, how are you going? Nilushi asks also about, what about if we care about the witch in the Rapunzel story? So this is a very good point, is that in the story of Rapunzel, which I talked about earlier, the old witch who's keeping Rapunzel in the room isn't necessarily a completely bad character. Like, I mean, she looked after Rapunzel for years. She used to climb up to Rapunzel's room to see her. So I think one of the ways that we can look at that is that these are, as a storytelling motif, these are ways of dramatizing particular sides of things. And if you can see, say, from a teenager's point of view, a teenager might often see their parents as being like witches or whatever, who are keeping them trapped in their home. Oh, I want to go out tonight, I want to go and party, but my parents won't let me. And they're putting all these constraints on you. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're bad people. But in storytelling, certain aspects of these things are dramatized one way or the other. But yes, surely I think that in that story, I suspect that the witch really did love Rapunzel, but didn't know how to do it the right way. Okay, now somebody has asked, an anonymous attendee has asked, and I'll hand this one to the Venerables Kondanna and Sutadhara, some practical step-by-step examples to start a meditation practice. Now, it's obvious at this time we've been creating distractions to mask the suffering. So how would you advise somebody to get started with meditation at this time? Venerable Kondanna, do you want to go first?
This, it's a hard time, but mentally, if they are shocked and if they are depressed, there may be difficulty, but still we have to start somewhere. And if they start with at least maybe 5 minutes a day, you are, without getting into that, you will never learn it. Right. Your own experience you are building up. So therefore, at least just for a short time, we have to sit and meditate and make effort. Without doing that, it's something like that you are trying to swim or without getting into the pool. So I believe we will start having courage. Let me see how we do that. So from our childhood, we have learned it. Many of these, traditional Buddhists, they have learned to meditate. We know that if it is in Sri Lanka, That we used to do it even in our regular school. Just before the assembly, we observe 5 precepts, and then we do start meditation just for a short time. If that is the situation, we have that in our system, but we have to reboost it. I believe this is what we have to do. Sit without most of the people, what do they do is, first time they sit, wow, this chaotic situation, because mind begin to quiet, and then you start seeing that wandering mind. As soon as you see this, they try to, no, it is not for me. So then they try to go away from it. Instead of building up their strength, they go away from it. Therefore, I would suggest to anybody, just start from 5 minutes. Sit and sit. Just be quiet and observe. At least you can sit quietly for 5 minutes every day. That would build up your, sitting habit. It become a habit, then it would be bringing slowly strengthening your mind. So my suggestion is that instead of thinking, just sit and begin to do it. You will be getting stronger and stronger every day. So that is your, your personal treatment. You are the one. Nobody else can do it for you. You yourself is the one to do it.
Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Venerable Sutadhara, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, well, as Venerable Kondanna said, that doesn't matter the time limit, that it is not, well, if you don't have that time to do like 30 minutes or anything, like longer, just take 5 minutes, it is okay. But at this time, I think it is a good way to put ourselves into the loving kindness, because that the streams, it's like always the thoughts are coming in, especially during this time. It is focused on some certain one area, but when we put it into loving kindness, actually loving kindness is a more thinking meditation. So that actually helps us to quiet your mind just by putting that into your loving kindness and cultivating loving kindness. Then the mind starts to calm down, and then go into the breath, watching the breath. Maybe that for those who haven't done meditation, breath meditation, practicing loving kindness meditation first, and then go into the breath meditation. Even when you do the natural watching of your breath, there maybe you can, especially for the kids, I think it is very nice way to bring them into counting the breath. Well, if you can count the breath, full breath, natural normal breath from 1 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 10, if you can just take it as a daily practice, like, okay, you take 3 long deep breaths as a beginning and give a lot of oxygen into your system and calm down, and then just count the 1 to 10 breaths, complete breath cycle, breathing in and out, and then the 1 breathing in, out, 2, likewise, just continue 1 to 10 and 10 to 1, 1 to 10, and just finish and go. That is, well, if you can have more time, go into that, but later on, you can drop the counting and just watch the breath, and then slowly expand it to other areas. So that's my advice, just for within this brief period of time.
Good. Thank you so much, Venerable. And just to add on to that, for anybody who is looking for some support here at Lokanta Vihara, we have our 717 service. And so at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m., that's Sydney time, Australian Eastern Standard Time, then you can join us for half an hour of chanting and meditation. That's 3 times a day. So anybody who's looking for some support for regular practice, then that's what we're there for. Okay, So another attendee has asked this, as a family, we have to be at home all the time for a long time. It can be weeks, even months. How can we keep the balanced mind for a longer period? Please help us with some tips. So how to help families to cope for a long period. Sometimes it may be kids, maybe they're not going to be interested in meditation practice, or what are some ways that we can help families to be able to thrive in these really unprecedented time? Venerable Kondanna, yeah.
I believe, depending on the age groups, if they are small children, they always like to read. So, for example, when they come here, they have storybooks, so they get and read them, get it read for the family, or if they can sit all of them together, maybe let's say 3 children plus mother and father. So that could be a good, if they don't have anything else to do, that could be a good, group session. So get one of the child to read the book and enjoy it. So parents can play the role of the teachers and get them to read it and see, different angles, different understanding. They can share, many different ways to spend the day. It could be sitting and chanting and meditation for the Buddhist families, if they are Buddhist families, and if they can take it a storytelling time, or a mother can teach how to cook. This is how we cook. There are so many different, activities that we can choose and do for the day. So they have to be creative.
Be creative, right? Yeah. Venerable Sutadhara.
Well, it's actually that even though people are within the house, but it is again, their larger world has kind of limited into this, like put it into a smaller version or mini version of it. And then the parents are probably working from home, or maybe one may be going out. And then it's as Maria mentioned, that managing can be like, you cannot give just one particular way to do it. But really, I really want to take this example from the advice to Sigala, that the 6 direction, taking that how these relationships work, like parent-children's relationship, and employee-employee relationships, friends, all the like teachers, the clergy, everyone, that we can create our own version of that. We are living in a very large area usually, but now we are limited into this small area. But at the same time, there are certain actually luxuries that you are having. Actually, now you are having like you can have a meal together. Maybe 3 meals together in the family to develop that relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Those things I think will help doing that. Even if you are limited to a small apartment, maybe you can get plant pots and that's the plant a seed there.
Exactly. And, right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's. Those are things that we can do, I think. And also make a phone. Definitely. Yeah, make a phone call to another person. Right. That's also
Yep. Definitely. Thank you for all of those good ideas. I mean, for me, I just say, for me, one of the things that is useful, or I find motivating, is I do my work for sort of Central, translating texts and things, and there's always so many things to do. And I look at people who are bored and I think, how can you possibly be bored? And so I you know, something about that to have like some kind of long-term goal or project, which, and some of the things you mentioned there might count as that, like say growing a garden or growing plants, or say reading a book with your family and with your kids. You know, these kinds of things can be quite a long-term process where you can discuss them and grow together. So that's just another one. There's been a couple of questions about the 717 program. Yes, that is on Dhammanet. So it's on the YouTube channel, and you just go to Dhammanet. Same thing, same group that's organizing this, and you'll find the 717 broadcasts are happening every day. Now, a few more of the questions I want to respond to here. And Nilushi has replied to my response. And Nilushi says, with all due respect, I'm not sure that you understand the question entirely. Thank you so much for improving on my understanding, Nilushi. That's very helpful, because when we answer questions, we try to do our best, but we don't always understand them. So it's really useful if you can give us that feedback, so that it will help us to clarify our answers. And so she was asking in the question of abusive dynamics, whether there are other dynamics, and what does somebody in a vulnerable position experience abusive dynamics do when they're also concerned about the abuser, especially if it's a partner or someone in one's inner circles. And of course, this is one of the terrible things about this. When abuse happens in the family, then it's the ones who we love and we trust who are doing the terrible things to us. I imagine, says Nilushi, looking after oneself first and being in a strong position to be able to assist others, even those who are abusive, without being affected and diminished by the abuse, is probably a good approach. Yeah, I agree. I do think that would be a good approach. Let me say, firstly, I don't have personal experience of abuse, and nor do I have sort of particular specialized training in this area. What I do have is my background in studying, especially mythology, and so I used this as a lens or as an approach to be able to talk about it. Also, because I believe that the stories and the fairy tales that's been told are the ways that women have used to communicate these realities down through the ages, and because they're not so a direct way of talking about it, they can be a way of sharing ideas that's going to be a bit less threatening and a bit less confrontational. So this is why I use that lens, and I'm going to continue using that lens now. If we look at the way that fairy tales handle this kind of situation, one of the things that we see is that the same basic situation occurs in multiple different ways. For example, Rapunzel, the story I looked at before, there's not an abusive husband there. In fact, it's the handsome prince who's rescuing Rapunzel from an abusive family relationship. And that's one kind of situation that happens in reality. In Beauty and the Beast, it's more complicated, because on the one hand, she kind of loves him and he's a good man inside, but he also does bad things. And through her love, she redeems him. And that's another kind of thing that happens. A story like Bluebeard is much darker. And in Bluebeard, the husband is a killer, and he's not redeemed and not saved, and she just manages to get out with her life. This also is another situation that happens. Another version of this story that my particular favorite is the story of Bhante Kundalakesa, who one of the great bhikkhunis in the time of the Buddha. And before she was a bhikkhuni, she was also kept in a room, isolated and trapped by her family because she wanted to marry this criminal who they wouldn't let her marry, until eventually they allowed her, and she married the criminal, but he turned out to be, well, a criminal and bad person, so she ran off and became a bhikkhuni. So that's an option which, Nilushi, maybe you need to be considering for yourself. I know that you're not in that kind of bad relationship, but anyway, I'm just suggesting it for you to think about. So that there are these different situations, and as outsiders, then we can't be too prescriptive about the specific responses that anyone in that relationship should do. And the first thing to do is to acknowledge the fact that it is an abusive relationship, because that's the first kind of hurdle of denial to get over. And the second thing is to communicate that to somebody, to try and find help. And then if you can find somebody who can help you with that, then they can help you respond to your specific circumstance, because the way that every pattern of abuse is different in different families and different households. And it's not always the case that the husband is the bad guy. It's not always the case that you know, that things are as they seem on the surface. So it really needs to be looked at on a case-by-case and specific basis. But I very much take your point, Nilushi, that in those relationships, it's often not a case of black and white, that they're good people and people who are loved, but very often the ones who are committing the abuse are ones who themselves suffered abuse in their childhood. And so this is how those patterns are going down, and so we can hope to break that cycle. All right, so there are a few questions remaining which are still unanswered. A couple of people have asked about the Venerable's discussion of impermanence and anicca, and the dynamics of that, and whether it's a good thing or a positive thing. Somebody's asking about that somebody said that the anicca is a positive thing. I think maybe Venerable Sutadhara said something along those lines. I'm not sure it's exactly what you said, but that was what the question was. So Venerable Sutadhara, maybe you can begin by addressing that question.
Yeah, well, the impermanence that when we look at, well, when we take it always that actually impermanence is the nature, but our attitude is that the response that then well, then depending on that actually we can differentiate this as like negative and positive. If then also if it is if there was this in the this impermanence, nature of impermanence is that always changing. So that change can happen. That also now it is okay. COVID-19 the situation, but when it is over, then what is there? So if that changeability is not there, then can we get rid of COVID-19? If not, we are stuck in that COVID-19.
Right.
So that is how I say that as a universal law, that impermanence is the only hope for us, because changeability is there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if we couldn't change, we couldn't get enlightened, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I believe we can change the situation too. That it is depend on our behavior. The part of it is trying to teach us, if we change our behavior, then we can defeat this virus. Until you keep not doing what we are advised to do in that this situation, so you will be letting it grow, continue to have. So therefore, by modifying our behavior, being at home, not going out, and taking precautionary measures, we can change the situation. I think that's also a positive side of this. So it's hard to do. What is happening is with the people is that they are experiencing something which they haven't experienced before, which means they did not stay home for a long time. This is too long. They have been out. They have been with the people. They haven't been in the office. So that is what they have been used to. So now they have to used to different things. So therefore, the situation is different. I believe if we could, all of us could stay home and taking these precautionary measures, I believe nobody would be contaminated and infected by this disease, and it will help them to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So that's one way to look at it too.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I just ask? This wasn't one of the attendees' questions, but there's been some talk, like here in Australia, our government has been coordinating with the religious organisations to ensure that people are responding to things, and this is a bit unusual for Australia. Australian government typically ignores religion pretty much. Like, it's not like America, where religion is a big part of the political sphere. Here, basically, nobody really cares about religion all that much, not the political sphere, usually. But our government here in New South Wales has been having regular meetings with the religious community, consulting with people, making sure people are informed, and making sure things like, say, religious services and things like that are not being held, or are only being held virtually and things like that. I've heard some reports that there are certain churches in the States where that's, they're going ahead with holding Easter services and so on. What's happened with the Buddhist community, as far as you know, in the States and in other places? Have people shifted entirely to virtual services, or what's happening?
In New York, especially, we were advised not to gather any, religious services, not to gather people.
Right.
So even at homes, they should not do it. And they have religious council with the mayor's council we have. And mayor's office are informing the people, informing the religious house of worships, not to have any gatherings, but be alert and be with the people and provide your services using other means, which means in all these new technological measures. Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay.
From the West Coast, that actually California, that even, well, the guidelines are there that not to have group gatherings, but so we have developed our own ways. Like, okay, if there is a funeral service, then we just take limited number of people, like maybe 2-3 people, just with that the social distancing, and then do the service. Also, memorial service too. That's the same way. But we are not doing it well. We are for me, that Monday and Thursday, our meditation and the discussion sessions are virtually done. So then also other temples, I know, then I see and I talk to them, then they have switched to virtually doing this.
Okay.
It is in the time, maybe even it is like that when the Buddha, during the Buddha's time, he sent a light beam and then talked, right?
right. And he never had to worry about the broadband connection or any of those kinds of things. Absolutely. But I mean, we should just, I think it's one of the things just to remember is to thank the IT workers who have made this possible, like the folks at Zoom and Google and Microsoft and many of the other companies have gone overtime to make sure that services are available, and often providing extra services for free. So we sometimes forget that in order to make these things work, there have to be actual people in offices and buildings making them work. They're not just sort of magic things that happen in the computer. So, yeah. So I think we've probably got time for one more question. Ananda Tilaksiri has asked a question, but I'm not sure whether I think we may have answered it. I'll ask Ananda this question anyway. Ananda, hi Ananda, how are you going? How's everybody in Perth? I hope your family is doing well. Ananda asks whether would be to one way of helping people to get out of their rut and to get out of their old habits and get them to practice Dhamma would be to identify any good qualities, however small that they may be, to highlight them and gradually help them onto the path. So to highlight the good qualities people already have. So bringing Dhamma in very small doses. So this is a suggestion from Ananda. What do you think, Venerables?
Yes, I think that it is very valuable, because you know what, that when we say that those altruistic joy or thing, always we should recognize whatever the relative, the size is always relative, and we always check that even the slightest action of good should be recognized and encouraged. Then only appreciated, then only we can actually improve. If we just ignore, then it will just swish away.
Sadhu. Yeah. Okay, Venerable Kondanna, do you have any final words for us?
I'm very happy to be with you this evening. For us, it's even just your morning. So thank you very much for putting it together. And as much as we can, what we do is we are providing services for encouraging our community. I believe all over the world, as you are in Australia, we are doing the same thing here. So especially to get to good habits, I think as Venerable Sutadhara mentioned, we have to appreciate, we encourage, kind of, verbal rewarding, at least praising them for the good habits. I think that we all should do. Or in child's mind that will be sitting in there, oh, this is a nice thing to do. So that's acknowledgement is very important part of our daily practices, and in the education part of education too. Letting go good habits. They don't know what is a good habit means sometimes. They don't know what's a bad habit if they do something. If it is a habit, they don't see it. So at least then when they do something nice, after we educate them, then we should be acting, oh, that's very nice of you. So nice. Thank you very much for doing that. So likewise, once we praise them, it's human nature. So we're always expecting something that would be, really hitting their mind, and that will be sit there and then we can't, really keep on working.
Yeah, thank you so very much, and thank you very much to both of the Venerables for joining with us today. We will unfortunately have to wrap up now. Hopefully we can stay friends in the future, and certainly if you're ever coming to Sydney, do get in contact if and when this pandemic is over. You can see behind me in the curtains there, the bright light coming through, and today is a exceptionally bright and sunny day here in Sydney. And one of the things that we can see in LA and in India, Bangkok, China, in many places, the clear blue skies have been seen for the first time in many years. And just yesterday I saw photos of the Himalaya from Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. And I found this very strangely moving. I had tears in my eyes when I was seeing these photos of the Himalayas, remembering the similes of the Himalayas that the Buddha talked about, and the impression that these mountains have on the mind to be able to see them. And people saying that we haven't seen these things in decades. Even whole children have brought up, become adults, and they've never seen this. And now suddenly we realize that actually nature is beautiful, and to see the sky and to see the clear air is a reminder that nature is beautiful and will support us if we just stop for a little bit and be quiet for a little bit. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you, Venerable Sujato. Thank you, Venerable Sutadhara.
And thank you, Venerable Sujato, and thank you, Venerable Kondanna too. And it's really a privilege to sit with